The dark raven call that escaped my mouth was beyond my control. It rasped low and gurgling and tore its way out of my throat. I had to clasp a hand over my mouth to suffocate the air so that no more could escape. My blood thrummed and I could feel the veins in my body swelling like they had done before, pulsing to a primal beat. No! I shoved the impulse down and held my breath as the townspeople ran across the stone bridge overhead, with torches yelling. I could hear their dogs leading the way with vicious barks and snapping teeth, and I wrapped my legs closer to my chest in the darkness beneath the bridge, blending into the shadows with my heavy hooded cloak drawn over my face. Eyes. There were so many eyes, and I could see through all of them, losing the place where my body hid, constantly fighting to stay in one piece, fighting not to fragment into hundreds of razor-black feathers and flapping wings. I had been fighting the darkness for days. I was a fool to think that I had overcome it after the events in Nava. Now here I was again, hiding and praying not only for my life, but the lives of those who lived in the small village of Kachatova. I had fled the border of Estonia weeks ago, wandered for countless nights through the barren cold of western Russia, falling to my knees when I saw the smoke of chimney stacks in the distance and the orange glow of candlelight flickering through the village windows. I had managed to go unnoticed for many days, feeding on any small animals I could find, and keeping warm at night under the shelter of an abandoned church. Most churches were abandoned these days, and even though the stone floors were cold, any shelter from the wind was paradise. I had found a beautiful nest at the top of the clock tower. It was perfect, dark, with many wooden beams jutting across the inside of it. A perfect place as any to call home. I should have stayed inside. Should have waited until later to emerge from my roost. But my curiosity had gotten the better of me. It had been so long since I had seen a human face, and I snuck outside, just to steal a look, to snatch a reminder that I was not alone. But I had wandered too far, and a young girl no older than 7 had seen me. Kill her, kill her, kill her! The voices ravaged inside my head. They had grown so loud and unyielding that I almost did, just for a little peace of mind. But in the end, I couldn't bring myself to do it. The guilt I would have to live with would be worse than the alternative. Now I was unraveling once more, and the little girl had run home to her family, told them of what she saw. Snow was falling into the almost frozen river that ran beneath the bridge. The wind cut through my skin and into my very bones, covering my cloak in a grey mix of ash and fresh powder. I could resist it. I told myself over and over. I could resist them. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lost cause. My willpower weakening with every ragged breath. Inside me there was a maelstrom of tearing talons and ripping beaks. I stole a glance at my arm, and the already dark feathers were growing through my skin like sharp thorns. Blood seeped from where they emerged, and I could feel the rest of me changing along with them. Another rasping caw broke through my vocal cords. My pupils dilated, my throat was sandpaper, and through the misty sky I could see the bulk of the Earth's shadow encroaching on the last sliver of the waning crescent moon. I saw it with eyes not my own. I saw it through the black bead of ravens that soared above the clouds. The villagers shouted in Russian. It would only be a matter of time before they found me. My kind was not often given kind welcomes, no matter what part of the world we found ourselves in. My eyes darted in the direction of where the river flowed. Bordering the village was the bare scraggle of a winter wood. If I could make it there, then I knew I'd be able to lose them amongst the trees. The woods would hide me, unlike the bare stone of the village. The trees knew I was their kin. They would shift the forest paths, forcing the villagers to run circles on themselves until they grew tired and returned to their homes. A violent wave hit my insides, sharp, cramping, and constricting all at once. The thwack of 100 bodies slamming into me. "Let go!" The voices cawed. "Unravel!" Unraveling would be the most natural thing in the world. It would free me from this torment. It would bring me safety and allow me to travel on the currents of the wind once more. There is no feeling quite that matched surfing on the open skies. Ravenborn, the shadows called my inner name. The name that I hid from the rest of the world. Spoke it with reverence. Chanted it like the call of a siren through the night. A call to my true nature. Every part of me wished to answer it. Tears thick and hot escaped from my eyes, freezing before they ever hit the ground. Every part of me wished to do as they said and let go. The only thing that held me back was that I knew I was not a good force upon the world. There were heroes, and the beings heroes fought. It was a black and white world, and in it, I was the latter. I was the creature of darkness that heroes slay. I was the ghost story mothers told to keep their children in line. It was not a choice. I saw clearer than most how fate cast roles into the great play of the world. Reality was a pantomime of illusion and subtlety. The actors forgot it was a stage they stood upon and mistook their parts as life or death, lost in the show, caught in the flow of a story no longer their own. Sleepwalkers. I had been amongst the dreamers once, and to be honest, things were simpler then. The snow turned into freezing rain, and the misty clouds shifted into dark as thunder rumbled across the sky. The river flowed stronger, and in the rush of water against rock, I saw the memories of that simpler time. They were full of light, sunny days and wide rolling hills of green, pastures and lavender flower meadows, sprinkled with little white daisies and butterflies. Even as lightning struck, I remembered the sound of colorful birds singing, not the dreaded caw of the crow of the raven that struck like church bells, marking the score of time as death processions marched. But the other birds, the birds that were not part of the shadows, the sweet birds that trilled intricately, beautiful melodies, like the notes of a piano under a skilled hand. I remembered a time where food was waiting for me when the sun went down, warm and aromatic, where there wasn't a worry in the sky, and loving arms were never far away. But I guess even then I had felt the signs that I was different. The way the ravens seemed to gather everywhere I went. They didn't speak at first, perhaps trying not to frighten me. They just watched, left feathers on the floor in my room, no matter how many times I closed the windows at night. There was no hint of sympathy from them now. I had been resisting them for far too long, and they were short of temper, offended by my refusal of their gift. Maybe in another world it would have been a gift, but not in this one. A raw and powerful caw came stripped at my throat again, and as I went to cover my mouth, I found it was no longer a mouth that sat upon my face. but a beak. A large black beak. Firelight suddenly filled the arched hollow of the space beneath the bridge, and I saw a man step towards me. His eyes went wide as he saw me hunched over in the dark cloak with a single beak protruding from the folds of fabric. He shouted out in Russian over his shoulder, and I could hear the rush of footsteps coming my way. I raised my hands to try and calm the man, but that only made his eyes grow wider. I looked down and saw a plethora of feathers protruding from my skin between the fingers from my palms, all of them covered in blood. Perhaps I should have let them capture me. I would have put an end to this torment. But there was another and stronger will that sent me running in the opposite direction of the man, towards the woods. It was cowardice, the desire to live no matter the circumstances. When faced with the void of death, you would be surprised how much agony the spirit can take before it gives in. I ran with a limp, keeping my cloak drawn tight around me in the night. The shadows ushered me into the folds, guiding me from patch to patch like the smugglers trading out of curfew. I wound through the streets with the men of the village shouting directions to one another over the roar of the rain. I stumbled as I moved from one shadow to another, not because the stones in the road, but because I could already feel my feet turning into the clumsy sharp of talons. I grit my teeth against the pain. "It doesn't have to hurt," the voices whispered. It was true. It only hurt because I resisted. It took everything I had, and the struggle was akin to a man battling with the rage of a tornado. That was to say, it was no match at all. The force inside me would eventually win. It always did. But each time it had taken longer and longer. If I could only control it, then I might have a chance to return to those sunny fields I remembered as a child. I might have a chance of a life free from the bitter dark. As I turned the corner, a heat of flame singed my cheek. I let out a squawking cry, throwing up my cloak and changing directions. But there were flames there too. They had cornered me. No! The drum beat of my blood grew louder, its pace increasing. Every vein in my body pulsed together. Boom! 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 The beat of my blood had called the thunder. Lightning struck, and the last silver of the crescent moon vanished behind the shadow of the planet. I saw the faces of men through 100 eyes. Saw the rage in their arms raising sharp sickles. Then the beat grew too powerful, and my heart gave in. I surrendered and all went still. My breath exhaled, and I felt the sweet relief of pain dissipating into nothingness. Dropping to my knees, I raised my face to the rain and sighed. Peace. Peace at last. My body unraveled, and when the men stabbed, all their weapons hit was the thick fabric of a dark cloak. I was no more. I was undone. The shadows rushed to greet me, welcomed me as their brother. For a long moment all was silent. My wish had been granted. The pain had stopped. Then suddenly, I was in the air. I was flying with black feathered wings, swift and silent through the agile night. I was one of them. Then I was hundreds, swooping down on the men as a maelstrom of beaks and talons. Their screams filled my ears as I tore at their skin, plucked out their eyes. There was no longer any part of me that tried to resist. They had asked for this. They were the ones who chased me and drove me into this blight. I was one of them, and the ravens defended their kin with vicious brutality. My vision left the hundreds, and I was singular once more, above the cloud. My wings spread wide, a large span of 8 feet. Raven-born, The wind rushed to meet me, and I swerved, dancing with the spirals and twists, spinning and swooping down below the cloud line, so that I was over the village again. I called out to my brothers and sisters, and they responded, leaving the alley where I had been cornered and joining me in the sky. The men were no longer my concern. I was free. Each time I soared through the skies, I wondered why I had fought to resist. Up here, I belonged. The black of my eyes scanned the ground, and the farmers who had not joined the chase looked up at me. Some of the hunters knocked arrows into their bows and attempted to shoot me down, but I knew well the distance their bows could shoot, and my perception of distance was much better than theirs. The points would not reach me. Even still, some of my kin swooped down to protect, and I saw through their eyes as the hunters were chased away. Some made it to shelter, but the others that hadn't been so lucky became food. The thrill of the night thrummed in my veins. The cool air glided effortlessly through the gaps in my feathers, and the dark of the new moon sung her song. At last, I could hear her melody. I understood again why the ravens didn't sing. Nothing could compare to the ethereal melody of the moon in shadow. It would be an insult to sing over such a song. The night wrapped me in its freedom, and I soared east endlessly. Then further north, following the currents of song. It was only when day broke that I began to feel the freedom flee. The winds died down, and I was forced to glide closer and closer to the snow-thickened ground. Eventually, when the first crest of the sun tipped over the horizon, my talons changed to feet, and I sunk knee-deep into the white cover. I breathed heavily for a moment as I shed my feathers and my beak withdrew. Bones thickening and limbs appearing where wings once were. A howl of tundra flurried across my bare back, and suddenly, my eyes returned to their human color. I drew in a ragged, long freeze of breath, and looked helplessly all around me. The memories of the night took on a new light. I saw the men murdered, and where once was pride, crept in guilt and horror. The landscape of wintered forest stretched on forever, and once again, I found myself alone in the bitter cold, and I caught a glimpse of the pantomime through the prison of an endless cycle. I was bound to this rule, bound until the curtains close.